If you don't want my opinion, Episode 19, The Road Not Taken, by Carl Marking. Several weeks after Christmas, I received a text from my sister. What are your thoughts on our brother either being transgender or being involved with someone who's transgender? Of all the outrageous theories I could have expected someone to propose about my brother, this one surprised me. What's the latest development in the unraveling of our brother? I asked. She responded with a comment he had made to our mother, some activity on his socials, an acknowledgement letter his wife had found for a donation he'd made to a transgender advocacy organization, and some oddities she had discovered in his luggage. The details my sister provided made it a fair question. From the time my brother told me that our father had said, I always knew he'd be a faggot, having learned I'd come out my junior year of college, to my brother refusing to bring his son to Michael and my wedding because he didn't want to expose him to our lifestyle, to not letting his son have a toy kitchen or watch musicals as a child, for fear such things would make him gay, to this moment, was a lot to process. This makes me feel vindicated in a special way, I replied. I just don't know what he's thinking, she continued. I don't know if he feels like a woman trapped in a man's body or if he envies Mom her ballroom dance dresses. I wasn't going to go down the stereotyping rabbit hole with her, and we had some back and forth about transgender versus transvestite. Did you never watch Rocky Horror? I asked. I've seen Rocky Horror on TV, she replied. I'm generally very traditional in my movie viewing. You have two LGBTQ brothers. Get on board, woman. In case you don't know who's who, I'm the Q. I just think of you two as people, no labels. And yet her discussion began by labeling our brother and the other person in his life. What's Q stand for? She asked. Queer. What's the difference between queer and gay? That was a big question with a nuanced answer, so I replied in simple terms. No difference, just taking back queer. She replied, Q stands for questioning. I wasn't going to argue with my heterosexual sister as she straight-splained my culture to me. We went on to have a lengthy exchange regarding what she'd been told to date and what she'd found out for herself. I've read all of this to Jim, I said. He wants to know what our brother's drag name would be. I told him, Hostile Feathers Whitmore. Hostile Feathers sums him up really well, she replied. Finally, you can be the golden child, I said, referring to our mother's pecking order for each of us. I seriously doubt it, although with JoJo gone I did move up one spot. She'll probably go off on me and accuse me of being something too. I called my sister that Saturday. She and her husband were on the way to the store. She told me our brother had come out to her mother just before Christmas. She was unclear as to in what capacity he had come out, and I didn't care enough to ask. What did she do? Made it all about herself, of course, and wished him dead. I considered my sister's earlier comment and choice of words about our mother potentially accusing her of, quote, being something too. It was such an odd phrasing, and it hit me as negating. As if a person who happened to be LGBTQ was less than whatever my sister presently thought herself to be. And suddenly, the weight of it all settled in. Our mother wishing another of her children dead. My sister's fear, homophobia, and disdain. Neither of them had grown at all in the 28 years since I'd come out. I didn't feel sorry for my brother about our mother's response, but I did feel some empathy for him, which surprised me. Later that day, my sister shared that the person my brother was involved with had allegedly shown up at his house and hit my sister-in-law with the front door as she shoved her way past her and entered their home. Holy fuck, I replied. She needs to call the police. Breaking and entering, assault, otherwise it may just get worse. And she needs to put it in the public record, my sister responded. Regarding our sister-in-law, I said, part of me wants to drive down to be there for her, but the rational part of me is like, you've worked so hard to separate yourself from all of this drama. Don't do it. Neither one of them listens anyway, my sister said in reference to our mother and sister-in-law. Will she move out? I asked. I don't know. He and his friend are supposedly going to live at Dad's while they pack it up. She should talk to an attorney, I said. I've told her that repeatedly. I asked her to pass along the contact info of an old friend of mine who'd become a state cop and happened to live near our sister-in-law. My days of trying to solve other people's problems ended a long time ago, and if she won't help herself, my sister responded. You tell yourself that, but you already told me you'd reached out to the state cop you knew. You're a good person, hate to break it to you. I spent the next couple of days doing research around our brother's online life to help our sister-in-law with what I imagined would be inevitable divorce proceedings. My sister was doing the same, and we found a stunning number of accounts and various aliases across a multitude of social media platforms. He'd used combinations of names from our family tree that repeatedly tied back to accounts established in his real name or to emails he had used with our family over the years. I learned my brother and sister-in-law had already begun divorce proceedings a month earlier, something my sister had failed to mention. I told her I'd found an account where he'd favorited a link to a video of a sexual nature. People have sex. I didn't really think much about it other than how foolish it was of him to still have it live, given he was running up to a divorce. "Be sure to send it to Mom," my sister said of the link. "I can't bear to watch." I had no intention of sending such a thing to our mother, any more than I understood why my sister would even suggest such a thing. "I probably don't want to know anymore," she said, then continued to ask me questions about the video. "Mom just called," she said. "I told her I was passing things on to you. I couldn't resist sharing the video link." That pissed me off. As she chose to traumatize our mother, in addition to trolling our brother, she was either blind to the fact that she was denigrating my sex life in the process, or just didn't care. Her commentary was judgmental, insensitive, and ignorant, in the truest sense of the word. I shared with Jim, who was bald, some of the comments my sister had made about the video. "What does she think we do?" I asked. "Braid each other's hair until we orgasm?" Before he could respond, my mother called. I let the machine pick up. "Your sister tells me you've heard what's been going on down here. What a mess," she said angrily. "I'm doing the best I can. A little chest pain. But other than that..." Her voice trailed off as she choked back tears and hung up, completely blind to the fact that she'd called the first child she'd wished dead, looking for sympathy after having done the same to another of her children. My sister continued to text and email me links and photos for what she was finding online. Given none of this was happening to her directly, her involvement in the matter had reached the level of fixation. "Are you still looking at the photos I sent you?" She'd found the person he was allegedly dating and had sent me links to their various social media pages. "No, I've moved on," I said. She continued her hunt as I continued to disengage. I turned my focus to our sister-in-law's safety. "Is she officially at Mom's?" "They're like two old ladies living together," she replied. "I hope she gets a sheriff to escort her to get the rest of her things soon from their house," I said. The flood of texts, images, and links finally slowed. Then my sister sent me this message. "I outed our brother to two of Mom's friends. One was having quite the time last night looking at his girlfriend's Facebook page. He had talked to her about the fact that he was seeing someone and had shown her pictures, but didn't mention she uses a urinal. Don't be a hater," I replied. "He's the confirmed asshole, but we don't really know much about his friend." "I'm not being a hater. He, or you, or Mom, can date whomever you like as long as you're honest about who they are. I won't criticize you. When you leave out a significant part of the story, it starts to look dishonest." Did she honestly believe it was her place to stand in moral judgment of other people's relationships? She expected absolute truth from us about the people in our lives, while she rarely said a word about her own relationship. Somewhere along the way, she had appointed herself our family's moral compass. I had to show one of Mom's friends her Facebook page. She's always taken him at his word. She needed proof that the assumed name he was using was actually him, and the only way to do that was to send her the links to all of their Facebook pages. She had to? My sister was out of control. "Mom just called me from her cell phone and hung up," I said. "She wants to talk to you and she knows you're there a lot of the time and just not answering. She probably needs to vent to someone. I met a client today, but we're still Facebook messaging. She assumes I'm here a lot of times and just not answering," I replied. "Unless her Christmas gift came with a nanny cam. Oh, wait. She didn't think we were exchanging gifts, so that can't be it. I'm glad you're at a client today. Gets your mind on other things, which must be a welcome change of pace." I emailed her mother and told her I saw her missed call, but had no interest in participating in the latest family drama. She replied it was a butt dial, that she has deleted my number, and assured me she will never call me again, reaffirming my decision not to participate in the drama. This was all deeply triggering for me. I could barely concentrate, my body was vibrating, my pulse racing, and I was seeing new patterns as my mind reorganized a lifetime of family data, factoring in everyone's reactions about my brother's news. I had reached a comfortable place in my life before all this began to unfold, and hadn't spoken with Faith in some time, but I needed a session to figure out what had me so agitated. I started off by bringing her up to speed on the various family dramas, all the way back to the argument between my sister and brother over her paying the majority of our nephew's college tuition. I told her how my mother had echoed my brother's comment, telling my sister, "What do you know? You're not a parent." I also shared a section from an email my sister had sent me, when she briefly thought our mother had written us out of her will. "I'm a person," she wrote. "How can she say that to me? I mean, it's her money, and precious little of it. But how do you say that to your daughter like it doesn't matter?" Personally, I had expected to be written out of our mother's will ever since our father had done the same. I was surprised my sister was surprised. I told Faith I was struggling to hold so many competing thoughts and feelings at once. My disdain and surprising empathy for my brother. My concern for what my sister-in-law was going through, even as I was aware she'd made her choice to stay in their abusive and dysfunctional relationship. My anger at my mother for repeating the same mistakes with my brother that she'd made with me. My concern for my nephew, whose life was going to be upended. And how the whole situation, including my sister's over-involvement, made my heart ache. "Let's slow things down," Faith began. "She's bringing up a lifetime of memories for you. I'm sorry you have to go through all that hurt again. It's clearly re-traumatizing for you. I don't know your sister beyond what you've shared over the years, but perhaps she was able to connect to some of her own pain through this, even if under the guise of vengeance and self-righteousness. She clearly yearned for a mother's love in the same way your brother yearned for a father's love, but neither of them could ever get it from such broken people." After my session with Faith, I called my sister to find out how she was doing. "Fine," she said, but her voice had just a hint of hysteria. My therapist says that FINE is really an acronym for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. That pretty much sums me up right now. I told her I was worried about how deeply involved she was in everything going on with our brother. "It looks to me, from the outside, as if you're taking it all very personally." She said nothing. "It's shocking to me that you'd call lifelong friends of Mom's and out him to them, that you'd walk them through the whole scenario as you believe it to be, that you'd tell them about their Facebook personas. And it makes me wonder, what are you getting out of it?" "His whole life, everyone has thought he was such a good person. It makes me sick," she said. "No, it makes me angry," she corrected herself. "I'm angry at myself for staying so involved with him and putting up with his shit for so long just to try and give his son an example of what normal looks like. I hope you're not still taking Mom's incredibly hurtful remark to heart about you not having the right to an opinion because you've never been a parent. Your willingness to put up with our brother so you could be around our nephew, the sacrifices you've made to stay in his life, that's entirely what good parenting looks like." "Thank you for saying that," she said, and tried to change the subject. "I love you," I said. "Thanks," she said flatly. "No, really. I don't want anything to do with this latest drama, but I want you to know that I love you, and I'm here for you if you need it." And I meant it. Even as this latest family spectacle unfolded, and I realized there would never be a way for any of us to have a meaningful connection, that my sister would never be able to truly be supportive of me as a gay man, I did love her. More warmly, she said again, "Thank you." I could still hear the hardness in her voice, her anger, the skepticism as to whether or not I was being genuine. I couldn't blame her. I often had the same guardedness. It's difficult to feel lovable when you grow up in a culture of craziness and abuse. Somehow we began talking about our childhood. It's difficult to know where the landmines are buried, so such discussions were always dangerous. She recalled a time we were coming home after dark when she'd picked me up from high school marching band practice. As we pulled up to the house, the headlights revealed our father's then-girlfriend on her way to the back door of his apartment. She shrank into the shadows and froze. "Like a deer in the headlights," my sister laughed. "I don't remember that. I think I've blocked most of that year from my memory." "And Mom having you work that summer at the Board of Education," she said. It was an odd comment, as she had never spoken about it to me before. Her tone of voice made it clear to me that she was carrying some anger or shame over it. Then she was back to our brother and the parallels between his behavior and our father's. "You know, he's the reason those boys he had you blow ended up the way they did," She ran through a list of names. What? I felt punched in the chest by her pivot. I had called her to be supportive, and she was bringing up my brother's sexual abuse of me with no warning. In her need to continue her attack on our brother, she once again made me collateral damage in the process. He put them on their paths. Because of what he did to you and to them, their lives fell apart. One is an alcoholic, one killed himself, and another ended up in prison. If he hadn't set up that whole situation, their lives would have been completely different. I began shaking. I don't see it that way. No, it's his fault. She was insistent, and the emotional weight behind her words made it clear nothing I said would change her opinion. Her words were horribly upsetting, but there was something new to my reaction, some disturbing nuance my mind wasn't willing to share with me in that moment. Though I had yearned for years to have a deep discussion with her about what our brother had done to me and the impact it had had on my life, she'd always steered away from one. Suddenly here it was, completely out of left field. I was caught entirely off guard. I was more triggered by the topic than I had been in years. You know, she continued, I ran into one of them once. They asked about you, not our brother, you. I felt gut-punched. She'd run into the adult version of one of the kids who had me blow him when I was 7, and what was her point? That he was thoughtful enough to ask after me? She was commingling my abuse with her perception of the impact it had on the boys who had willingly participated in it, all while attempting to use what had happened to me as further evidence of our brother's failings. Did she think I should take the words of my former abuser as some kind of compliment? With no regard at all for how inappropriate and traumatizing her words and point of view were, she had unwittingly dumped their failed lives at my feet. Whether it was her intention or not, the impact of her words was to put the responsibility of their lives on me and my abuse. Those boys weren't the ones that had dicks shoved into their mouths. I was. She had no understanding or empathy for the fact that I had been the victim, not those boys. You know, I finally said, he didn't put any of them on a path. And again she cut me off. No, she said, our brother did that to them. We endured a brief silence as I felt the skeletons of my past rattling. Do you think our brother was ever molested? She asked. Well, I paused for a moment. I had learned to be tentative with my family when discussing how our father had molested me, given their lack of support on the matter. It was also suddenly clear to me she was trying to assign blame or establish a link between our brother having potentially been molested and his recent coming out, or whatever it was he was going through, which made it equally clear to me she must also believe my being gay was either the result of our father having molested me, the result of the abuse I endured from our brother pimping me out as a child, or a choice. She clearly couldn't or wouldn't accept that I'd simply been born this way, that sexual orientation was a combination of genes and hormones, and everything else that happened to me was happenstantial, not causal. I have clear memories, I continued in answer to her question, of you and I being put in the bathroom in the middle of the night with paper and crayons. He was not brought in with us. I always just did the math. I don't remember that at all, she said. Not in opposition to my statement. She was just stating a fact. As I thought about her actions, outing our brother to people she felt were allies in his life, I wondered if it was possible that she truly couldn't see how vengeful and self-righteous her behavior was, how traumatizing it may have been for the people she called. Until the moment she reached out to them, they'd been going about their lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in hers, unprepared for what she was about to force upon them, with all the intimate details she felt should go with it. It wasn't right, and it wasn't like her. I was thinking about how you're telling Mom's friends about our brother, and I couldn't help but think of Moby Dick. I can't help but picture Captain Ahab and the line about, if his chest had been a cannon, he'd have shot his heart upon it. She changed the topic, and we started recounting other childhood memories. She told me how she'd once planned to run away and had packed a bag for me, reasoning if our home wasn't safe for her, it wasn't safe for me. She said she used to escape to the labor's furniture store to get away from the house. I shared how I would volunteer during the summer at our nearby elementary school in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade to do the same. It was a rare, unguarded moment between us, and then we said our goodbyes. After a few moments, I began to vibrate. My hands were shaking. Every time I touched the hot stove that was my family, I got burned. I couldn't stop replaying my sister's remarks on a loop, especially the ones about our brother having put the boys he'd pimped me out to on a particular life path. I was losing my ability to separate her narrative, created to support her worldview, from the realities of those actual events. I called Faith the next morning and we talked it out. Hearing her objective reassurance that I was not to blame helped me recenter. What those boys did to you, Faith began, was unforgivable, but I'm sure if that had never happened, they would have ended up exactly where they are as adults. Any 8th grade boy who would accept a blowjob from someone as young as you were was already wounded and broken. She paused to let that sink in. Which is why, she began, but I interrupted her. I know, I said. Which is why, whether or not that had ever even happened at all, they'd have all ended up exactly as they are, she finished. We'd gone over this trauma many times over the years, and I still occasionally needed this reminder. I'd done so much work on this particular trauma, but the experience had left an indelible mark. But, I said, but what? What pubescent boy isn't interested in getting a blowjob? My younger self was feeling responsible and agitated. The difference, Carl, is that most 8th grade boys would not want that experience from a 3rd grade boy. I said nothing. An 8th grade boy who would accept a blowjob from someone that young was already wounded and broken, she concluded. The next day, my sister sent me a screen grab of an exchange she'd had with our brother, in which he threatened her with defamation if she continued her hateful efforts. She said she replied, "The truth is not defamation," then blocked him. She'd fallen back down her rabbit hole of retribution. Just be careful not to get burned, I said. I will call 911 at the first sign of him. She offered more details about a conversation our mother had shared with her, in which our brother had supposedly shared some very specific details of his sexual appetites. When she began asking me detailed follow-up questions about same, I reached my limit. I doubt very much she would have said something so graphic to Mom, I replied. I no longer have faith in anything that comes out of her mouth, and I don't make it a practice to think of his sexual proclivities any more than yours. I think that's the way it's supposed to be, she said. Telling one's mom about one's preferences crosses a line. And passing that same info on to me is what? I asked. No response. She hadn't wasted any time passing the information about that video link along to our mother. Her moral standards seemed to apply to others, but not to her. I would prefer not to hear these things, I said. You're going to drive yourself nuts. Trying to make logical sense out of crazy behavior is a fool's errand. She was sitting in judgment of our brother's every move, of our mom's every move, of our sister-in-law's every move, and it was freaking me out. The energy she poured into it reminded me of something Victor used to say. If it's hysterical, it's historical. When I made that connection, I realized my sister's reaction and energy went far beyond what was happening between our brother and his wife. She had indeed tapped into her own lifetime of woundedness from the treatment she'd received over the course of her lifetime, not only from our brother, but also our parents. Carrying around so much hurt and anger without unpacking it could make anyone have an episode of behavior that goes beyond their typical actions and reactions. We had one final exchange on the matter relevant to our sister-in-law. She's so innocent, my sister said. She's just a victim in all of this. Although I agreed she didn't deserve any of this, my sister and I knew too many intimate details of their 20-year marriage for me to buy into the notion that either of them were innocent victims, and when I said as much, I didn't hear another word from her. After I had time to process, I realized that whatever had gone down between our brother and his wife, my sister needed someone who understood the big picture of it all. She needed someone who understood the context of what all the revelations meant against the entirety of our shared history as siblings, back to our childhood traumas. Unfortunately, that someone was me. She also needed, what was to her mind, objective proof that our brother was every bit the bad person she'd always known him to be, and she needed me to bear witness to it. However, her proof, within the context of this current drama, was rooted in her trans and homophobia. In categorically denigrating his actions, In revealing her open disdain and disgust over his alleged sexual proclivities, she was, by extension, revealing her disdain and disgust for my life in the process. Although the prior year had offered a glimmer of hope that perhaps we could have some kind of a relationship after all, there wasn't enough of a healthy bond between us to withstand her actions, reactions, and comments around our brother's experience at the end of his marriage. About a month after our final exchange regarding our sister-in-law, I received a birthday card from my sister. 2 pieces of birthday advice, it read. 1. Forget about the past. You can't change it. 2. Forget about the present. I didn't get you one. Considering she'd so recently reminded me of one of my most traumatizing life events from my past, while I gave her the gift of my support in the present, the card was completely tone-deaf. I stopped engaging with her. She eventually turned to Michael for her rants, who in turn provided me with high-level summaries of my family's latest dramas, even though I wasn't asking for them. His stories affirmed for me that stepping back had been the right choice. I had another stroke event that summer, my 5th. It damaged a section of my retina in my right eye. After seeing half a dozen cardiologists, I finally figured out the root cause for all of my strokes and needed open-heart surgery to fix it. I said nothing about either of these events to my mother or sister. Sharing the information would have only led to more disappointment. That October, my sister-in-law called me for the first time in the 24 years I'd known her. It was the same day her divorce from my brother had been granted. During our 90-minute call, she told me what she had to endure over the years with my brother, how much she missed me when I pulled away from my brother so many years ago, and that she understood why I'd done it. She invited me to her son's 21st birthday party, which was doubling as a going-away party of sorts for her, as she was moving out of the area for a fresh start. Although I initially accepted her invitation, after thinking about it for a couple of days, I decided to decline. I let her know how wonderful it had been to speak with her, and how happy I was for her that she was moving on with her life, but that I didn't feel comfortable coming down and spending time in my mother's house. Too many bad things have happened to me in that house, I wrote. It's too painful for me to be exposed to my brother's behavior. Invariably, the conversation turns to him and our father and the hateful things they have done and the damage they left in their wake, and I won't expose myself to that anymore. I offered to meet with her one-on-one and asked her to give her son my love, but she didn't reply. That Christmas, my mother, sister, and I all exchanged cards, but nothing else. My sister's card was signed only by her and not her husband. As the date for my open-heart surgery approached, I decided the right thing to do was to tell both my brother and sister about the congenital heart defect that had been discovered, as well as the test they'd need to have to see whether or not they had the same thing. I didn't expect to hear back from my brother, nor did I, but I was disappointed not to have heard anything from my sister. But for all I knew, she'd blocked me just as she had our brother. Weeks after my surgery, as I was recovering at home, Michael texted me that my sister had asked him what he thought she should do in order to reconnect with me. I was too weak to get into it and change the subject. About a week before my birthday, I texted him, I was thinking about your conversation with my sister, how she plays up the whole, what do you think I should do, and then does nothing. I sent her a birthday card, let her know about the surgery, but zero from her. It's like she's play-acting concern for your benefit. But if she were sincere, it seems to me I'd have had some kind of contact. I don't really care either way. It's more marking bizarrity. I thought you'd heard from her, he replied. Nope, haven't spoken to her in a year. She hasn't replied to my last couple of emails. We exchanged cards at Christmas, and she texted me, my mom, and our sister-in-law a ridiculous avatar of herself with Happy New Year on it, but that hardly rises to the level of having heard from her. It felt to me as if my sister was trying to play Michael and me against each other, which was shades of our mother. On my birthday, I did get a text from my sister. It was that same avatar she'd created of herself that she'd used at New Year's, only this time the text read, Happy Birthday, and her avatar was holding 2 red balloons. I was lying in bed with drainage tubes coming out of my chest from a surgery she knew I'd had, and rather than ask how I was doing or send a get well card, she sent an avatar of herself. No reasonable person, given my circumstances, would consider that a genuine effort to connect. I thought about her birthday text for weeks. Because of the text exchange I'd had with Michael about her alleged interest in reconnecting, I texted her. Why is it that you text me on New Year's Eve and my birthday, but have had no meaningful contact with me in over a year? No response. In fact, I didn't hear another thing from her the rest of that year. I did, however, have an interesting call from my mother that fall. Jim and I were in my car together and I took it over the car's audio system. She told us my sister had gotten divorced and her cat Gertie had died. After we'd hung up, I thought about her divorce and the death of her cat and said to Jim, "That's too bad about the cat. She really loved that thing." My mother had been giving me hell for pulling away from her, and I sent her a letter explaining, once again, why I had done it. Years earlier, when I had sent her a similar letter, she told my sister I had also said things about her. My sister rightly didn't believe the things our mother said I had said, and reached out to me for a copy of the letter, which I sent. Having finally figured out our mother would indeed play all of us against one another, I proactively sent my sister a copy of my latest letter, along with this note. You won't like some of my opinions in this letter, but this is where I was, this is what caused me to pull away, and this is what I was thinking at the time and to this day. I share this with you only because Mom probably won't, though I'm sure she'll choose bombastic selections for you to hear. I call her out on some of the things she'd done to you over the years, which is, I imagine, a disincentive for her to let you read it. She so often pitted us against each other for her gains. At least this way, you're getting it straight from the source. I was sorry to hear that Gertie passed. I know how much you loved her, and I know how incredibly painful it is to lose a beloved pet. That unconditional love is such a rare and wonderful thing. I'd say I'm sorry to hear you and your husband are splitting up, but I'm not. And I don't say that to be mean-spirited or unkind. It's just you said to me so long ago that you were thinking of divorcing because of how unhappy you were, but that the financials just weren't worth it. And I was so sad for you. Money is never worth loneliness or living a hollow life. I don't know who finally pulled the trigger on your divorce, but in the end, I hope you find your way to peace. You and I have our bad blood, but nothing on the scale of Mom and I. Be well and be happy, and get your heart checked. I didn't hear anything back from her, but didn't expect to at that point in our relationship. Quite some time later, as Jim and I were having coffee on his front porch with the dogs, I got a text from my sister. I hope you have some fond memories of me. I immediately replied, the door is always open, but we have a lot of work to do in repairing decades worth of damage and disappointments between us. If you're ever serious about doing the work, let me know. Sensing the shift in my mood, Jim asked, "What's going on over there?" "I just got the strangest text from my sister," I said and read the exchange. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Nothing. I've done all there is to do, and you know how I feel about pebbles at my window." I hated it when people made the least amount of effort, acting as if it were a Herculean attempt to right an existing wrong. As we had our coffee, I considered her text and sent my feelers out into the universe. "Something's wrong," I said. "I'm going to call her." She answered the phone and I had her on speaker. "I got your text and was worried about you. What's going on?" "I'm in the hospital." She didn't elaborate, though it must have been serious to have sent me that text. She was also clearly high from pain medication. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. He's here." "He who?" "My husband." Jim and I exchanged confused glances. Based on both my mother's comments and Michael's updates, she should have been divorced by this point. "Okay," I said. "We were sorry to hear about Gertie." "Gertie's fine. I'm sure she can't wait for me to get home." And again, Jim and I looked at each other wondering what the hell was going on. She seemed to be struggling to maintain her focus, so I wished her well and hung up. "What the fuck was that?" I asked Jim. "Am I glitching? Didn't my mother say she had gotten divorced and Gertie was dead?" "Yes," Jim said. I had finally had enough. Enough of the hate, the lack of support, the conflicting realities, the voting for batshit crazy corrupt politicians who wanted to strip me of my rights now that I finally had them, the mis or disinformation from my mother, the battles, the slights, the saying one thing while doing the opposite, or nothing at all. It had been a lifetime of crazy, and finally, after so many years of trying to retrofit a lifetime of wounded, broken behaviors into my healthier life, I let go. I let them all go, and focused on my life, my goals, and Jim, the man I loved with all my heart, who loved me back with all of his. Jim, who was always there for me, always supportive, always honest, always accountable, and who was always willing to work through any bump that came our way. I felt free. The following year, on my birthday, my sister texted me another avatar of her likeness popping out of a box with the words, "Happy Birthday," built into the image. The idea of her popping out of a box at me was terrifying. I didn't engage, just more pebbles at my window. Another year passed, and I got a text from her that our mother was having a medical issue, and she felt I should know. Our mother was the same age her mother had been when she died. I thought about how far away my sister lived from our mother, and imagined our brother, if he was even still in the picture, was probably an unreliable resource, so I offered to help coordinate our mother's care if my sister needed the help. She thanked me, but said her doctors were quite close to our mother, and she was still driving. She went on to share that our mother was lonely and unhappy. Though sad to hear, it was no surprise to me. She'd been unhappy most of her life, and narcissists tend to end up alone. Over the next few months, we'd periodically exchange texts. Just small talk about our lives, travel, parties she'd had, and our current pet situations. I asked her at one point about an old musical she had been in high school, Annie Get Your Gun. The song, "You Can't Get a Man with a Gun," runs through my head sometimes, she said. You have the gun, I replied. Do you want a man at this stage? I don't expect to ever meet anyone I want to spend time with. I wasn't ever good at finding someone. Her comment was almost verbatim what our mother used to say to me in the aftermath of our parents' divorce. I didn't respond to it, as I had a different point of view about her marriage having ended. It had seemed to me that things between her and her husband had never been solid. She had been married for 19 years, and the majority of their conversations that I had witnessed were laced with her criticisms of him. The only nice thing I could remember her saying about him was around the time they'd come to see me in rehab after my strokes. It was his idea that we get a hotel room so that we could see you both days, she'd said. He's a good doobie sometimes. In paying him that compliment, she was oblivious to the flip side of her remark, which was that if not for his thoughtfulness, it wouldn't have occurred to her to see me more than the one day. 8 months later, she texted me happy birthday once again. I wished her a belated birthday, but received no further response. I still couldn't understand why she wished me the occasional happy holiday or happy birthday, but wouldn't engage with me at any other time of the year. I asked Faith what she thought of it. I can only speculate, she said, but it could be as simple as a desire on her part for the comfort of the connection you once had as children. Weeks after my birthday, genuinely curious, I texted my sister the same question I'd asked 6 years earlier. Why do you wish me happy birthday when we don't interact the rest of the year? As before, she didn't respond. 3 months later, our mother sent my sister and me a picture. When I noticed our brother wasn't on the distribution list, I texted my sister, "Is he out of the picture?" To my surprise, she replied. I asked Mom the same, and she said she doesn't have his current email, or she thinks he's blocking her so he doesn't get her messages. She's currently mad at him anyway. She does miss you. She's also 83 and getting frail looking, so there's a limited amount of time left for her. How are you doing? I asked. She didn't respond. We put Shelby down last month. You don't know her, but she was my Gertie, I said and sent her a picture. I'm sorry to hear about Shelby, she replied. I thanked her for saying that and let her know that I was at peace with things between our mother and me. Her condolences about Shelby were her last direct communication to me. My sister had said from her hospital bed that she hoped I had some fond memories of her. It's challenging to pull apart the good memories from the bad. The bad left me in alternating states of fight or flight, depression, isolation, anger, and occasional normalcy. My childhood was an entanglement of fear, abuse, tension, and secrets. Most of my energy and focus were consumed by my efforts to survive it. But I do have fond memories of my sister. Memories of playing hide and seek, of lying on our bellies, side by side on the floor of our bedroom doorway to the hallway on hot summer nights in front of a large, teal-colored box fan our parents would set up to pull cooler air our way. We'd get as close as we could to the metal grate, talk into its breeze, and break into fits of laughter at our voices, distorted by the metal blades. Of going with our father to Aberdeen Proving Ground where he worked, she and I once climbed up into an open plain and imagined being on a flight as we talked into an oddly shaped cup attached to a hose. At the time, we imagined it was some kind of communication system, a militarized version of tin can telephone. Years later, I learned it was actually a relief tube, which is to say, it was how the men on the plane would, well, relieve themselves mid-flight. It made the memory even funnier. What did we know? We were so young. Of taking piano lessons together for years at the home of a widow who lived in a centuries-old home on a farm on the outskirts of town. Of going door to door around our neighborhood, singing Christmas carols for money or treats. I still have some of the music books we used. Of doing ceramics together on Saturday mornings. She once decorated the figurine of a Victorian woman with a fur-trimmed coat and hand muff. She made the coat blue and gave her blonde hair and long eyelashes. I was always so impressed with her talent. Of baking cookies together, using our grandmother's stand mixer, which would shock us any time we happened to simultaneously touch it and the front metal edge of the Formica countertop. Of making candles, coloring and baking shrinky-dinks, and roasting hot dogs or marshmallows together in the upstairs wood-burning fireplace. Of watching TV together. In the chaos of our lives, even such a simple thing could bring us peace or hope, which was like rain on a desert. Of playing in her room. We'd listen to 45s together on her portable record player. Hearing Elton John and Kiki Dee sing "Don't Go Breaking My Heart" instantly reminds me of time spent in her room. Of her teaching me how to dance the hustle in the first-floor living room. Of going to the movies together, just the two of us. Of locking our brother in his room when he wouldn't turn down the amp on his electric guitar, then cutting the power at the circuit breaker box. Of hiding together in the attic from our brother or father. We'd use the pull-down steps in the ceiling of the computer room, then pull both the steps and the access cord up behind us. The attic was unfinished except for a single, narrow row of subfloor that ran the width of the house from side window to side window. We'd quietly explore the family luggage, old toys, and whatever else our parents kept there among the dead flies and sawdust, as we waited for the mood of the house to improve. Of experimenting together with a dry packet of cocktail mix from the basement bar to see what all the fuss was about. We grabbed a packet of bartender's whiskey sour mix, divided it between 2 Dixie cups from the bathroom cup dispenser, added some water, a maraschino cherry, a crushed Oreo cookie, and then ran and hid between one of our beds and the wall. We took a sip and instantly spit it back into the cup, laughing at how disgusting it was. Of selling Girl Scout cookies together door to door, and later, cases of fruit to fundraise for the high school marching band. We made a good team and sold the hell out of both. Memories of surviving our father, our mother, our brother, our childhood, and our loneliness. Together, as brother and sister. When we were very young and staying at our grandparents', the room my brother and I would share had a small old radio with an illuminated dial. I'd listen to the one station I could tune in as I tried to fall asleep at night, watching a red blinking light on the tall tower visible through the bedroom window. The music must have been broadcast from a small local station, as the same songs seemed to play each visit, year after year. One of them always struck me as definitive about my relationship with my sister. I don't recall having ever heard it anywhere but at our grandparents' house. To this day, if I hear it, which admittedly I don't, unless I go looking for it, I'm reminded of the years I was once connected to my sister. Always behind her, always looking up to her, always waiting to be seen by her. Epilogue. Before I turn the page on my relationship with my sister, I want to revisit my coming out episodes. When I released the last of that 4-part series, 5 months after my last text exchange with my sister about my dog having died, she left a flurry of comments where I published the episode. She said that my compressed timeline meant that she couldn't possibly have said my being gay was an affront against God and nature, and denied her boss had been married when they'd been dating. My choice to compress a timeline had no impact on the validity of her having said those hateful words to me. As for her claim that her boss hadn't been married, I have believed she'd had an affair with her married boss for more than 30 years. He was married because I'd been told he was married. My sister had once told me herself that he was married. She said he was getting a divorce, but no one, including her, ever told me the divorce had ever actually happened. On the occasions I was around them at her workplace, their co-workers had referred to his wife and child. I asked our mother directly if she had a problem with the fact that Manny was married the day my sister had introduced him to her. She said nothing to challenge or contradict my perception of his marital status, which further solidified the fact of it for me. The fact of his marriage was affirmed to me by multiple sources multiple times, and no one, including my sister or our mother, ever shared an opposing narrative with me. Compressed or full length, nothing about my understanding of their relationship was dependent on a timeline, but rather the facts as I believed them to be. As my sister said herself of our brother around the time of his divorce, when you leave out a significant part of the story, it starts to look dishonest. In doing the research for these episodes about my relationship with my sister, and writing it all out, I clearly saw how profoundly wounded we all were by our abusive father and our equally wounded and narcissistic mother. In the early years of my committing to therapy, I didn't have the distance from myself to realize how much I was changing. I couldn't see how surviving my life and doing the work to process the trauma had fundamentally changed me. As I learned healthier tools, I grew stronger and became less apologetic for living my life as me, for me. I have sporadic contact with our mother. She's every bit the hot stove she always was, but I finally have no expectations of her, so her burns aren't as painful as they once were. I haven't spoken to my brother in more than a decade, and can't imagine under what circumstances that would ever change. I exchange texts with my sister-in-law a few times a year, and she seems genuinely happy and at peace. My nephew and I are complete strangers to one another. I have to say, if I were him, I wouldn't want to engage with me. There's too much damage between his father and I. I doubt my sister and I will ever communicate again, beyond perfunctory or legally required communications when our mother passes. I can imagine her sending me a blank email with the subject, "Mom dies today." Maybe she'll send a text with an avatar of our mother popping out of a coffin. Either would be on brand. I also realized in writing our story that my sister and I haven't shared a single, meaningful experience since we became adults and our paths and ideologies had so profoundly diverged. Through her actions and her politics, she'd gone from being my protector as children to becoming the thing from which I needed protection as an adult. It was a chilling revelation. She hadn't been my ally since that day on the ice when she protected me from the older kid that wanted me to blow him and his friends. That was the last time I could remember her standing up for me. That was the last time she'd protected me. That was the last time she'd advocated for my safety. All the angst and energy and hurt feelings over the course of our adult lives, for nothing. All we had was an extension of our survivorship. I just couldn't see it. Once I did, I spent months mourning the loss of a relationship that hadn't existed in far longer than I had allowed myself to believe. What mattered most between us, what was most impactful to us in our relationship, happened when we were children. We provided a safe haven for one another so we could survive the cruelty and trauma of our family. The rest was a decades-long attempt to solidify a connection that no longer existed. The tragedy is that we couldn't find a safe haven in each other as adults to survive the cruelty and traumas of life. For the first time, and I can't remember how long, I had a dream about my sister. Jim and I were living in a beautiful, centuries-old townhome that had been restored. We had a house full of his work colleagues and their children. The scene was complete chaos. In front of our home was a flea market. I stepped outside and into the market for some peace. As I wandered around looking at the various wares, a young blonde-haired woman with clear blue eyes approached me and handed me a small decorative bowl. It was made of something black and polished, with colorful inlays and etchings. "Here, this is yours," the woman said. As I was about to say, "No thank you," believing she was trying to sell it to me, I realized she was my sister. "No, it's for you," she said. "I got it because I thought you'd like it." I was my present age, but she was about 25 years old. She wore her fine blonde hair in a short bob that flattered her face, and she seemed genuinely happy. Her demeanor took me off guard because I had so infrequently seen her genuinely happy throughout our lives. "I love you," she offered. She has rarely said these words to me first, or in person, and my immediate reaction was to be wary. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My life didn't quite work out the way I had intended. No children, no husband. "So you came to Europe?" I asked. "I often come to Europe. You know that." "What are you doing here?" she asked. "We live here, in that house just down the block, there," I said and pointed. "Here," she said, "take this," and handed me the bowl, putting a small, brightly polished brass bell inside it. She turned to walk away. As I held the bowl, it reminded me of the mortar and pestle our maternal grandparents had displayed at the stairwell window just outside their bedroom door. Their mortar was made of a shallow, dark gray, translucent stone that just fit in the palm of my large adult hand. The memory of our times at our grandparents' made me smile. "Wait," I said. She turned toward me. "Come inside. See the house and say hello to Jim." "I don't want to be a—" "The house is full of people," I interrupted. "You won't be in the way." We climbed the worn stone steps up to the landing. I put the palm of my hand on the carved handle of the massive, ornately carved wooden door. "You should be careful," she said, looking behind us. "You never know who's waiting." "It's fine. We're safe here." Something inside the handle scanned my palm, and the door opened. We were greeted by madness. Jim's colleagues had left, but their kids, ranging in age from 8 to 18, were running around everywhere, on the furniture, and making a mess of the kitchen. Jim was in the center of all of it, with a deeply concerned look on his face. He was paralyzed with indecision as to how to handle his colleagues' children. My sister smiled at the scene. "Come on," I said, and headed for the kitchen. The staircase to the basement was next to the kitchen island where one of the older children was unsuccessfully trying his hand at making pancake batter. As we descended the stairs, we were outpaced by water and batter running down the wooden staircase. I looked up behind us as Jim was intervening. He then met us on the steps, with towels, and we descended the rest of the flight in silence. There was a finished room at the bottom of the staircase. Jim was losing the battle with the water and batter, and as I opened the door to the room, the batter and water dripped onto its top edge and ran down its panels. Then I woke up. Long ago, as I was coming out and AIDS was raging, I turned to all sorts of self-help and spiritual literature, as well as books on meditation and self-hypnosis, in an effort to quiet my anxious mind and find ways to manage the aftermath of my violent and sexualized childhood, my rape, and my coming out. I read a lot about dreams and their meanings. What I had learned in those years was that when we dream about a house, it's often a metaphor for our lives. The elements of the dream made sense to me. Jim and I are planning to flee to Europe, if needed. We love historic buildings. Jim loves a good flea market, and we both love to entertain, so the chaos inside and out made sense. I also tend to start at the bottom of things and work my way up. It's how I approach most things in life. What's the foundation? Beginning the tour in the basement made sense to me, as I spent more than a year digging into the foundation of my relationship with my sister in order to write these episodes. We also enjoyed baking and made many pancakes and messes in our kitchen as children. The batter and water following us down to our foundation was a perfect metaphor of our mess and memory. As for my sister, when she chose to do so, she gave incredible gifts. It was small but substantial, simple and beautiful. I haven't looked, but I bet a bell symbolizes either an opportunity to wake something up or ward something away, which has been the dance she and I have done with one another our whole lives. The dream left me with the impression that under it all, versions of ourselves love each other, versions of ourselves that don't currently exist. The immutable reality is that love is not enough to maintain any relationship. You also need mutual respect, a shared set of values, and consistent and equal effort over time. We don't have those things. We haven't had those things for each other for most of our adult lives. We spent years trying to build on a foundation that didn't exist. It's no wonder our journeys have left us so far apart.